We are now recording. It's all yours, Matt.
Great. Thank you, David. Welcome, everyone. I'm calling to order officially the informational meeting for the school budget, which will be voted on by Australian ballot next Tuesday, or before then, but the deadline for getting in your ballot is next Tuesday. What we are going to be doing this via the Google Meets setup that you have all been joining. And there's a couple of protocol things that I'm going to ask and then explain how we're going to conduct this meeting today. The first is that we will ask everyone to stay on mute. You should default to mute until the time when we are going to be asking for input and when people are called upon. You should be able to see the mute button and unmute button at the bottom of your screen. The second thing that I'm going to note is the raise your hand button, which is also in that center panel at the bottom of the screen. When we get to the time where we're going to be taking questions, which will be after the reading of the articles and the presentation, I will be asking people to press that button if you would like to ask a question of the school board. And I will ask that questions be contained to the subject at hand, which is the school budget for fiscal year 2023. I will also ask for folks, when they have completed asking their question, to click that button again so that their hand comes down. It would be like if you were in town meeting and you raised your hand to speak, and even after you spoke, your hand was remaining up in the air. That's not what anyone would do. So we need to go through that action just so that we can keep things organized and we know who is up next for providing or for asking a question of the school board. So that is what we're going to do. Again, I'm going to read through the articles in order, and then we will have a presentation from the school board chair and our principal, and then we will be going to a question and answer period on any of the articles. But it doesn't make sense to ask questions before the presentation, which explains the background of each of the articles. Assuming that is fine with everyone, we will get started. So the first thing we want to present is the actual warning that we have that has been submitted and distributed as appropriate. We'll go through the individual articles that are in the warning one by one so that people who have eyesight of over 50 like I do will be able to read them. So next slide. Article 1 is the article that warns that we're going to be electing the officers for the next terms at the in the ballots that that everyone should have received by mail that need to be returned by next Tuesday. Article 2 is the article to act on the reports of the school district officers for the past year. Article 3 is to vote for the school district to pay taxes to the town treasurer, such taxes to be collected on the same schedule voted at the town meeting, in this case by Australian ballot. So this is the ability to raise the revenue in order to pay for the budget that you will be asked to consider to vote on. Article 4, shall the voters of the town of Heartland approve the use of capital reserve funds in the total amount of $54,600 for improvements to the food service line in an amount not to exceed $25,000 and improvements to the water lines in several classrooms in an amount not to exceed $29,600. And this will be also, as you may have seen on your ballot, an individual Australian ballot item. Before I go on to Article 5, I'm going to ask Nikki Buck, our school board chair, to talk just a little bit about this before we go on to the other articles in the general presentation.
So I just wanted to highlight why these improvements are necessary. For the plumbing, we have a 50-year-old building. When the building was designed, the sinks were placed slightly in the room so that students can access the sink from all sides. And this meant that the plumbing went through the concrete floor and is dispersed throughout the building under the concrete floor. As you can imagine, 50-year-old plumbing starts to leak, and the challenge is that this plumbing is in a concrete floor. So this article allows us to shift the sinks from the middle of the room over to the wall and to rerun the plumbing in the wall where it can be accessed in the event of a problem. So this is a modernization and to prevent leaking for the sinks. The food service line is also 50 years old. And as you can imagine, you can look at the existing on the left. The 50-year-old service line does not have the same sneeze guards or food protection that a modern food service line has. Additionally, the food, just the quality of the ability to keep food warm or cold is not, it's modern. We're proposing to modernize that as well. 50-year-old technology for food warming is not effective. So you can see on the right is the proposed model. We would make this in Heartland Elementary colors, so it would be blue. And it provides sneeze guards all around the food. It provides a better serving line for the people working in the kitchen, and it also modernizes the heating technology. That's it. Matt, you're muted.
Not that I'm old, but I can attest to the fact that I used the same setup that is currently there now. So I think it's probably time. Article 5, to vote that the school district is authorized to borrow money from the Capital Reserve Fund or a commercial lender in anticipation of taxes to meet the requirements of the school district for the ensuing year, and to authorize the execution and delivery of notes or orders to the school district. Again, an item on the ballot that you have received. And then Article 6, shall the voters of the Heartland School District approve the school board to expend $9,581,349, which is the amount the school board has determined to be necessary for the ensuing fiscal year. It is estimated that this proposed budget, if approved, will result in education spending of $20,628.62 per equalized pupil. This projected spending per equalized pupil is 4.33% higher than the spending for the current year. So that is the reading of the articles, which we just want to make sure that we do in a formalized way. Now I will turn it over to Nikki Buck to start the presentation, and she will hand off during certain portions to Principal Christine Bourne.
So as you all know, we're starting year 3 of a global pandemic, and everybody's exhausted. But more excitingly, we're in year 2 of implementing our schools, our supervisory union's new strategic plan. This plan was the result of 2 years of working with stakeholders in our community. And the strategic plan represents a shift from learning content to learning to learn. And this is to help our students be more productive members of our new society. Our goal is to graduate students with the following traits and skills that are listed in the slide. That's empathy, perseverance, integrity, communication, and critical thinking. We are actively engaged in the process of redesigning how school works so that we can accomplish these goals. So now I'm going to turn it over to Christine Bourne to describe what's happening in the school and how we work towards those goals. And then I'll come back and talk budget numbers with you.
All right, thanks, Nikki. And thanks everyone for coming tonight to hear where we're headed at Heartland Elementary School. It's pretty exciting. The work that we're doing is pretty exciting. So I shared this slide last spring at our informational meeting with you because it sums up the exciting and necessary transformation that is happening in education. I also shared our newly adopted strategic plan and the goals outlined in that plan. And one of those goals in our strategic plan really speaks to the transformation in education that we are moving toward. It is our goal of increasing student success and engagement, and we're addressing it through a shifting of educational practices toward a more student-centered or student-driven approach to teaching and learning. We know that this shift in education is critical if our students are going to thrive in the complex, rapidly changing world that we all live in. Students must be able to apply content knowledge to solve real-world problems, communicate effectively, and collaborate with others. They must become self-determined learners. Under the direction of Tina Skehan, who I think is in this meet tonight, she's our pretty amazing librarian and STEAM coordinator. Teachers have been working collaboratively on this goal of increasing student success and engagement. Teacher teams work together to plan interdisciplinary units of study. We refer to them as IDL units. And these units provide students with opportunities to be in the driver's seat when it comes to how and what they learn. It is magical to see the transformation that happens when students are given voice and choice and ownership of their learning. And so we're going to show you a small snippet of what the shift looks like in our school. And I want to thank Tina and the students for helping with this present. Oops, I think.
Okay, so what are you doing in IDL right now? At the moment, we're using a program called EdScratch, and we have these little robots, and it's kind of like the program Scratch, and it's coding with blocks, and you can program the robots to do certain things, and it's going to help us learn coding, and then later on we're going to do a compost program, so we can help save like food scraps and stuff for the school, and that'll help with the garden so we can grow more food.
Okay, what's been your favorite part of IDL so far?
I kind of like the hands-on learning because it gives you a way to actually experience the things that you're learning, and it helps you visualize with them. So it's not just like learning, like you can actually experience it.
So you prefer that over paper?
Yeah.
Doing paperwork? Okay, thank you. What are you doing in IDL right now?
Right now we are using programs to make comic books about characters that we've made and making either comic books, memory cards, or a whole bunch of different things that we could make in ordering, like just a type of comic.
What's your favorite part about IDL?
I really like doing hands-on stuff more than computer, and it's just fun that we get a whole bunch of different options of stuff to do.
Oh. Huh. Maybe we'll have another Edison.
He did it.
There you go. All right, Andrew, now get this and bring it to the next one. Oh, God.
No, it isn't. 50 hours is from 5 days.
Get it! Pick it up.
24 hours in a day. 48 hours in 2 days.
Ooh.
This is first it goes down. Go up.
It's up.
No, it's not.
It's up.
Yeah, we have our
Oh, okay.
We'll just have a giant there
There we go.
Oh!
to manipulate this.
Put it out.
Don't fling the compost everywhere.
You can't, I can't.
What was your favorite IDL project so far?
When we made the map. My favorite project was when we made the map.
Why was that your favorite?
Because we got to make these little puddles and bushes and roads and stuff like that.
What are some of the projects you'd like to do in the future in STEAM?
I want to make solar-powered planes to fly.
So I hope that video gave you a sense of the work that we, and when I say we, I mean the students and the staff, are doing to address the goal of student success and engagement. Increasing student success and engagement is a big part of our strategic plan and one of our main goals. But we also have two other goals that we're going to talk about tonight that are part of our strategic plan and also part of our recovery plan, which is what I'm going to talk about next. Let me see if I can. I think I have to. All right. Just bear with me. My computer's being a little bit funky right now. Oh. Give me 1 second. There we go. Okay. So in the spring of last year, we were tasked as an SU by the Agency of Education to create a recovery plan that would address the needs of our students brought on by the pandemic. We worked diligently to align our recovery plan with our newly adopted strategic plan so that we could make efficient use of our resources to support our kids. We had hope that the FY22 school year would be a year of recovery and a return to a more normal school year for our students and our staff. And although this year has been anything but normal, I'm happy to report that we've made significant progress on all three of our goals. I just shared some of the progress on our student engagement and success goal. The other two goals that we're working on are information and communication and school culture and student wellness. So for our goal of information and communication, we know how very, very important it is to connect and partner with our community and our parents. And it's been really difficult for the past 2 years not having parents and community members being able to come into our school and see what we're doing and share in the joy that we're creating in our school and the work that we're doing. But we've worked really hard to keep the community connected through weekly updates, our newsletters, our social media, and our websites. Some other exciting things that we've done to connect with the community are we have a new data dashboard that's part of our recovery that was created by our curriculum and instruction team and Brittany, our recovery coordinator. And it is showing how we're progressing on our goals within our recovery plan. We've also been able to continue with our community dinners, which we have one this week, which we're very excited about because it gives us a chance to see community members that we don't get to chat with every day, and you get to sample some of the delicious food that comes out of our food service program, which uses local products, and it's delicious. So hopefully you've had a chance to partake in that. One of our most important goals in any year, but especially during the recovery period of the pandemic, is creating a school culture where all students thrive and ensuring that we meet the diverse needs of all our students. We do this through our multi-tiered system of supports, or our MTSS system, as we call it. The mission of our MTSS system is to create a systematic approach to decision-making for excellence and equity within a culture of continuous improvement that focuses on successful outcomes for all students. I'm going to break that down a little bit for you. But some of the needs that are addressed through our MTSS system include academic needs. They include social emotional needs, behavioral needs, mental health needs, food insecurity, physical health, and attendance. We meet these needs in a variety of ways and using a variety of resources and funding sources, but much of which is included in our local budget. The question that drives our MTS system is, what does each student need to succeed? And so I'm going to break down the process for you so you can understand kind of what it looks like in practice. So you're a teacher and you're in a classroom, and you're using data, and you're using observation, and you're using your expertise, and you're noticing a student that is in need of something more or something different. And so you would go to the pod level interventionist, and you would ask the pod level interventionist to schedule this student on the Kid Talk agenda for the next week. And then when that Kid Talk meeting happens, a group of educators, and including teachers and special educators and interventionists and support staff and behavioralists, come together, and they discuss the student, and they discuss various strategies that could be put in place that might include adjusting instructional practices, or double dosing of curriculum, or providing visual tools, or preferential seating, or differentiated instruction. And then you, as the classroom teacher, would go back and implement some of those strategies. And then you'd meet again to check on the progress that's happening for that student. And if there's not enough progress, the team would brainstorm some additional strategies to put in place. And that cycle would repeat itself. When the team meets again to check in, and a student is really either having success or not having success, two paths are taken. If success is happening, the student, you would continue, obviously implementing those interventions. If it's not happening, or the student is still struggling, you would call for an SSP meeting, which stands for Student Success Plan meeting, and the team would come together and brainstorm additional supports, more targeted interventions, which might include a smaller intervention group with the interventionist, or an intervention group that happens more frequently. And so that's what the system looks like. And if the student support plan is not enough, we would begin the child find process, which is really a data gathering meeting to determine next steps, whether we do some additional assessments so we can learn more about that student. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes it leads to a special education process. So that's what it looks like in practice. I want to introduce you to our MTSS academic team, and they're pictured here. They are led by our MTSS building coordinator, who is our assistant principal, Lindsay Perkins, and our team of interventionists. Our interventionists are the people that coordinate the weekly meetings with the grade level teachers to look at student data and create and implement those plans that I just described. Our MTSS academic team is currently servicing 110 students in our building, which is roughly 44% of our student population, through small group or individual instruction. This is our MTSS Social Emotional Behavior Support Team, and it is made up of our 2 school counselors, an HCRS clinician, 2 social emotional interventionists, our assistant principal, our We Are Hope coach, our nurse, and a board certified behavior analyst, and our homeschool coordinator, who is an SU person, but services our school as well. And I will say the stress of the pandemic has caused many students to suffer from mental health issues related to anxiety, stress, depression. It's also caused an increase in challenging behaviors in our school. Our team meets weekly to discuss students who need social, emotional, or behavior supports. We create plans, we apply resources, we meet with families and other local agencies to ensure that the needs of these students are being addressed. It's a real wraparound approach. The team as a whole works with all HES students at the universal level through social emotional learning classes taught by one of our school counselors. Our advisory program at the middle level, which allows teachers to really develop strong, trusting relationships with students, which we know is very impactful and necessary. And in-class proactive supports. They also work with students who need more on an individual or small group basis. So from October of this year to January, our social emotional interventionists have provided roughly 250 proactive interactions, which are check-in, check-outs, scheduled breaks with kiddos per month. And we're called roughly 200 times per month to respond to a student in need of support for de-escalation or regulation or validation, which really allows those kids to de-escalate and then get back to class and continue with their learning right along with their peers. Our school counselors, our We Are Hope coach, our HCRS clinician, all of those people together are servicing 70 plus students, one-on-one in daily or weekly sessions with additional small group sessions each week. And I can tell you there's a waiting list to be on those caseloads still. So we are very grateful for the resources that we have at Heartland Elementary School that allow us to work toward meeting the needs of all our students. And on that note, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Nikki for the next section.
So now we're getting into the budget numbers. I think Christine gave a good overview of some of the positive things that we're implementing in the school that follow on to from our strategic plan. I also think that she enlightened everybody on some of the pretty substantial challenges that we're facing as a result of the pandemic and getting kids to be able to focus on education in this time is challenging. So moving on to the budget portion of the presentation, here's an overview of the budget portion and just some background information. Heartland is essentially tied with Windsor and Norwich as the 3rd most popular towns in Windsor County. So we are not a small town within Windsor County. In our school, we take care of between 420 and 430 3-year-olds to 18-year-olds. And those kids represent 12% of our community. We have a poverty rate of 43% as measured by our free and reduced applications, free and reduced lunch applications. And just so that people understand, 7 years ago when my son first started in the school, our free and reduced lunch population was more around 20%. So this is the free and reduced rate has doubled in the last 7 to 8 years. So we're going to go through our student enrollment, our high school costs, the budget goals, changes from FY22 to FY23, projections and rates for FY23, the supervisory union assessment, and the projected tax rates. Next slide. So here you can see our projected student enrollment for FY23. We lost 11 students as a result of the pandemic, and at this point we hope to get them back, but they haven't come back yet. Right now we have, we're projecting 40 pre-K students, but not all of those students will be coming in for kindergarten next year. We estimate approximately 26 new kindergartners, and the incoming class size has been fairly consistent between about 25 and 28 for the last couple of years. And so we are projecting to have, we're servicing 424 students. 195 of those are in our high school population and out of the building. So we can go to the next slide. My notes are on a different screen. So these are our high school tuition costs. Our high school tuition costs are based on how many students we're serving specifically. So each student has a cost at each of the schools that we send our students to. The average tuition cost per student is around $18,094. And if you look at our full budget numbers, our high school tuition costs account for approximately 30.8% of our budget, and they represent 34% of our students. So we pay close to $3 million to our high schools, but they're servicing 34% of our students, which is fairly reasonable budget-wise. So for a history of our special education costs, you can see here we have a slight increase over last year. And so the special education costs are allocated from the supervisory union based on the number of equalized pupils in the district. So it's not based on the individual students. The supervisory union pays for the individual students and creates a budget for them. And then we pay based on the percentage of equalized pupils that we have, that we service in the supervisory union. The number of special education students is increasing disproportionately to the total number of students. And this increase may be tied to an increase in our free and reduced lunch population. In 2022, the supervisory union serviced approximately 270 students with disabilities, and this represented approximately 23% of our total student population in the SU. To put it in perspective, the average percentage in the United States is 14.4%. And in Vermont, it's 16%. So while our percentages are higher than these averages, this fits with the findings of a Vermont study that districts with higher economically disadvantaged populations have a higher percentage of students that are recognized with disabilities. And so going forward, we're hoping that future state funding formulas recognize the challenge that we're facing with respect to our special education costs. Next slide. So our goals, hold on, I'm having slide management issues. Our goal is to support the whole child in every aspect of setting our budget. So the goals for the FY23 budget is to maintain a staffing plan and a program of studies which supports the whole child. And this means intellectually, emotionally, socially, and physically. And I think you saw some of the MTSS work that they're doing in the school to help meet those needs. We're also required to meet the Vermont State Education Quality Standards that are set forth by the State Board of Education, and to retain the trust of voters by bringing forth a responsible budget. So I want to present on how we're meeting the Vermont State Education Quality Standards. The state would like schools, classes in kindergarten through third grade to have less than 20 students per teacher. And you can see here that we have our smallest class has 12 students and our largest class has 14. I also want to note that we are intentionally using funding related to the pandemic to reduce our class sizes. And so the numbers you see here includes that intentional use of additional teachers to lower the teacher to student ratio. In grades 4 through 8, we're supposed to have less than 25 students per teacher. Our smallest class is 15 and our largest class is 18 students. All core teachers, which are the primary academic subjects, are supposed to teach less than 100 students total. And we have 4 teachers that are teaching 7th and 8th grade, and they service approximately 64 students each. You may remember in a presentation 2 or 3 years ago where we were hitting a point where we were projecting that our core teachers were going to be teaching 110 students each. And so we readjusted our allocation of teachers in order to reduce that workload. For curriculum requirements, we're required to teach PE twice a week to students. We have 2 PE teachers that also teach health education. For approximately every 300 students, you're supposed to have 1 full-time library media specialist. And we have 1 library media specialist who also teaches STEAM. And she's also our IDL leader, who you saw who you saw some of her work in the video. Next slide. So continuing with our curriculum requirements, we're required to teach global citizenship, which includes world language or cultural studies. Our 2 Spanish teachers do that. Our K-5 Spanish teacher services 152 students, and she is primarily embedded in their classroom, working with their teachers to teach Spanish and Spanish culture. We also have another Spanish teacher that teaches 6-8, and she has an individual classroom where students continue their Spanish education. We are required to teach artistic expression, and to do that, we have 2 music teachers, and those music teachers teach instrumental, choral, music theory, and drama, and they together service 239 students. We also have 1 art teacher who services 239 students. Christine talked a fair bit about our multi-tiered systems of support, and so we'll list it here again. We're required to provide behavioral supports, and we do that through our assistant principal, 2 social emotional interventionists, HCRS, which is an outside service that's contracted. We Are Hope is another outside service that's contracted. And we also have a board certified behavioral analyst on board to help us understand more challenging behaviors. We are required to have 1 school guidance counselor. We learned that we need more than 1. We have 2 school guidance counselors that also teach social emotional learning. Their days are booked out and they provide group and individual counseling. So they're necessary members of our staff. Going back to Christine's presentation of our multi-tiered systems of supports, I wanted to go back and tie our budgetary changes and the things that we're including in the budget to those multi-tiered systems of supports, because that really is where the bulk of our changes or additions are getting put in. For our multi-tiered system of supports for the academic portion, we're increasing a 0.5 full-time equivalent interventionist. You saw our interventionist team that Christine said was servicing 110 students. That's a lot of students. We've particularly noticed that there are specific grades that are behind in reading and math. And so we really want to target those specific grades to bring them closer in line with where we'd like to have them. We're also increasing our music position by 0.4 so that we'll have 2 full-time music teachers. This is partially an equity increase in that a lot of students don't get the chance to take instrumental music or aren't exposed to instruments in the home or in their outside school activities. And so we really felt that it was important that all students were able to have access to the same learning, whether it was in school or out of school. The other advantage of this increase is that we've had significant scheduling issues with our music instruction program, and this will allow for more flexible scheduling and less pullouts from important coursework. Moving on to our social emotional behavioral MTSS supports, we're planning on maintaining the current FY22 services. As Christine mentioned, we do have a backlog of people that are trying to get into services, but we're hoping that as the pandemic subsides, that will also subside. So we're going to maintain the FY22 services. One of the things that we as a board has felt is important is that we need to address food insecurity in our community. Approximately 10% of our students have true food insecurity. And we think it's important to provide them access to locally grown, where possible, homemade foods during the school week. So as you notice, we're trying to upgrade our food service line to provide quality food for all students. In the future, we hope to provide universal meals, which would be meals served for free to all students. This year, they are served free thanks to the state in their pandemic funding. And we hope to continue this in future years. So you may be hearing more in the next budget presentations. The physical health of our students and their ability to participate in winter activities is also an equity issue. I firmly believe, and a lot of our board members believe, that part of our job as a board is to help raise future Vermonters. And in order to raise future Vermonters, they need to know how to exercise and be physically active in our long winters. And so the school is proposing to fund a good portion of the winter activities, which allows students to learn how to ski, snowshoe, ice skate. There's a long list of activities to teach our students how to do active things in our long winters. And lastly, we need to continue to have good student-teacher collaboration. And we're doing this through maintaining a small class size, especially as we work through our pandemic recovery, and also building in additional time for teachers to collaborate with each other and to discuss students or to meet with students so that those students can feel more connected to their teachers. Next slide. So I talked about a lot of these changes, but here they are listed. We're increasing the music position by 0.4 FTEs. We have a 5% increase in our healthcare cost to our staff. Our staff negotiated a salary increase based on an increased workday, which aligns with the supervisory union. This allows for coordination across the supervisory union with teachers that teach like subjects, which gives our teachers more peers. The special education costs have increased, although not as much as in previous years. Our high school tuition costs have increased as a result of increased costs at the schools that we tuition them to. We are increasing by a 0.5 FTE intervention position to bring up 2 specific grades who are behind in our goals. And then we're also proposing to locally fund our winter activities program. Slide. So this is what I would refer to as the fine print. So I will read it quickly and move on. So the budget projections and rates, there are a variety of projections and rates that are used to prepare the budget. Some of these numbers are calculated or determined by the Vermont Department of Education, the legislature, and that would include the number of equalized pupils, the common level of appraisal, and the tax rate. Other projections are based on information gathered from payees, which would be vendors, high schools, insurance companies. Some rates and costs change after the budget is voted on by the local community, and that could be the tax rates, which, as far as I know, are currently not set, the state reimbursement rates, and negotiated salaries. Those, at least we know, are set. Therefore, this budget is a best estimate and cannot be precisely calculated. Slide. Okay, so here's our proposed budget. And what you can see here is that manpower is our greatest expense in the budget. The wages and the benefits lines are combined, makes up the largest percentage of our budget. Our SU assessment is also primarily to manpower through the business office and our special education teachers and staff. After we look at our manpower, our next highest budgetary item is our tuition to high school students. And then the remaining 6% of the budget goes towards supplies, contracted services, and maintaining the building. Next slide. So now we take a look at the supervisory union assessment for Heartland. And again, this is based on the number of equalized pupils and the percentage that that represents within our supervisory union. So the assessment to the SU covers the business costs of running a business with employees and costs, buildings, our special education program, our early childhood program, which is the ages 3 through 5, the pre-kindergarten program, and then our food service program that is shared amongst all of the SU schools. So you can see here the difference in our supervisory union assessment is $265,210. Next slide. So how does this impact our taxes, which is what everybody really wants to get down to? The current tax rate is $1.737. And we're projecting that that's going to go up 3 pennies, which would be $1.767. So if you have a home value of $100,000, it would go up $30. If you have a home value of $500,000, it would go up $150. And so then we can move to questions. Matt, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Excellent. Thank you, Nikki. All right, so what we're going to do, if people have questions, to please raise your hand by pressing the button that is at the bottom, should be at the bottom of your screen. It's being displayed, and we'll ask people to do that. I'm happy to then call on people as they do that, and we will then work through it in an orderly fashion. I will, if there are people who are wanting to ask a follow-up question, I will make sure that we have heard from everyone before going back to someone a second time. And then I will ask that when people have finished asking their question, that I believe what they do is they press the hand button again, and it will take their hand back down. So first question is coming from Jim Riley, who should be able to unmute himself.
Thanks, Matt. Probably a couple easy questions. How many elementary school students are there and how many high school students?
I can take that one if you want, Nikki. So high school, currently 148 high school students, and elementary is 240. I believe we are at 243 today, Jim.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Great. Are there any other questions? If you have a question, please feel free to raise your hand. I'm recognizing Chuck Fenton. To please unmute yourself and ask your question and take your hand down. Thank you. Chuck, you do need to unmute yourself. You're automatically muted otherwise.
Got it.
There
Thank
you go.
you.
Yep.
My question is, considering the somewhat rapidly growing rate in our poverty measure, the free and reduced rate, I'm curious how the school is interacting with town government to discover why that rate is growing so quickly. Thank you.
All right. So, Nikki, do you want to take that one?
So we did do a series of discussions with, actually they were facilitated by Mount Escutney Hospital staff to try and understand what was happening in our community and how we could best serve those community members. And Christine and I were on different committees. The committee that I was on was looking at more of the structural things that we can do in town, including like the one that is proposed in the town budget is to hire an ordinance manager, and that person will help make sure that communities that community members that are living in our town are able to live healthy lives, and the ordinance manager will help by ensuring that basic living standards are met, and if they're not, they can help refer to outside organizations. Christine was on more of the interpersonal side, so I'll let you take that side.
Yeah, I was on the team that was really looking at social services, access to what is available for families, and making sure families were pointed in the right direction and helped along the way, and how that process worked. So that was the committee that I was on, and you know, the town, I meet with Dave regularly, and you know, talk about these things, because some of the things that happen at the school also happen at the rec, which is the town run organization. And so we try to collaborate and figure out how we can support families and students. So I wasn't on the committee that really was looking at why this is happening, but more of how we can address the needs of students and families within the town.
Did we get your question, Chuck?
Well, thank you for explaining what you've been doing, but that doesn't really clarify in my mind what is actually happening, perhaps in the relationship of the school and the town government, because it appears to me town government has an important role to play in this process. So I'm just curious, are there any outcomes yet, measurable outcomes from this work to help us understand what might be going, and how those of us that are residents of our community may somehow participate in a constructive way?
So I think, I mean, so I'll say anecdotally, some of the challenges that we're facing is families moving back in with their parents. And then also for whatever reason, in the inability to find a job or excess housing costs in our communities. And then the other thing that we've noticed is a lot of our grandparents are now the primary guardians of students. And so those are two of the things that we're observing, I guess, is to highlight what is happening and why it's becoming a problem. Not that it's a problem, but it's certainly a challenge to be faced. As far as how things are changing and the implementation of it, that takes a lot of time, and the ordinance position that's proposed in our town budget was one of the biggest outcomes of the group that I was working with. And so I guess I'll put in a plug for the town budget and approving the ordinance position, because I think that that's really going to help us get a handle on what's going on in the community. Because right now, my understanding from being on the committees is that we just don't have the staffing to have somebody out there all the time figuring out what's happening on every single road all over town.
Okay. Thank you, Chuck. Are there other questions? I do know there's one person who is on the phone. If they have a question, I don't think they're able to actually raise their hand. They would be welcome to unmute themselves and ask a question. Just want to make sure we're including folks who may not be able to use the computer systems to be able to participate. Okay. Any additional questions? Chuck, would you like to ask a follow-up question?
Thank you, Matt. Yes, I would. And perhaps this is for Dr. Baker. I'm also curious about the delta or the difference between our residential and non-residential rate. Our residential rate is considerably higher than our non-residential rate, as I'm sure you know, and it seems to be growing every year. That variation appears to be growing, and this year my understanding is it's about 13 cents. In other words, the residential rate is higher than the non-res rate by about 13 cents. And over the years that we've had this tax formula from the state, many towns that I've had experience with, usually it's the other way around. So I don't know if Dr. Baker may be the appropriate one to help us understand that, but I am curious why this delta, this difference between those two rates is growing so rapidly, and it's favoring the non-residential rate, which is actually growing less rapidly. Thank you.
Yeah, Chuck, this is David Baker. I don't have a good, clean answer. Our business manager, Ed Connors, I think is also on with us tonight. I don't know if Ed knows the difference or what's creating the gap between the homestead rate and the residential, the homestead rate and the non-residential rate. Ed, do you have an answer to that question and why that gap appears to be growing a little bit?
As far as when I look at the two different rates, the homestead rate is subject to legislative adjustment, meaning they can change the rate at any given moment in any legislative session, whereas the rate for the homestead is based off of yields. So I'm not sure why the two rates have been diverging in the rate that they have been, but as a purely almost a guess, I would say it would be the fact that the cost per pupil for your school is high, and therefore it's going to be reflected in the tax rate, whereas it's not going to have any effect in the non-homestead tax rate.
Yeah, and Chuck, that without being an expert, that's what I was going to say. The non-homestead tax rate isn't affected by any variables other than what the legislature sets as that rate, whereas the residential rate definitely is going to be driven by by the equalized pupils numbers and the expenditure budget, and those pieces that we have a little more control over. Ed, the only other question I'd ask, and certainly not to put you on the spot, but do we see that differential in our other two districts, Mount Scottney School District and the Weathersfield School District? Does there appear to be a divergence like that?
No.
Okay, yeah. So my guess would be that it is being driven by cost to a certain degree. What I have found historically, and it might be good to, to do a little bit deeper analysis of this in terms of other districts, that Heartland again, shares the benefit, and it's a great benefit, and it's something this town certainly wants to hold on to of high school choice, and we see the cost associated with that. The same thing in Weathersfield. Heartland's not the only town that offers high school choice, but I will tell you that as you look around the state of Vermont, I think there's less than a dozen districts now. If you're going to start comparing those differentials, that especially after the Act 46 mergers, that still offer high school choice. And again, that's not to blame the whole thing, or to even say that that's driving it. But I mean, I think that those are the variables, that and somebody else, it might have been you, Chuck, mentioned the increased poverty rate, and it's research will tell us that poverty brings with it certain challenges, social, emotionally, and academically, and I think that's another piece that's causing a little bit of that divergence. So I don't think it's anything to do with the non-homestead rate, because that's set and it stays fixed. It really is the changes in the homestead rate, which is based more on all the variables we have to deal with around costs.
Great. Thank you, David. Stacy Bradley has her hand up. Stacy, if you want to unmute yourself and take down your hand and ask a question.
Thank you, Matt. Not so much a question, a couple of comments. One, basically in relation to the last question, David Baker and Ed both basically got that right. Homestead tax rates are affected by the equalized per pupil spending in a town, and the non-homestead tax rate is not. The common level of appraisal also is applied as an overlay to both of those, so that also affects the both of those tax rates based on whatever the common level of appraisal is within the town. And then just otherwise a comment that I've wanted to say, for the first time in 2 years, I was able to go into Heartland Elementary School on Monday and participate as a person to see presentations done by middle school students doing Shark Tank style presentations. And it was just wonderful to see these young people and see what they are capable of doing. It just constantly amazes me. And it was so wonderful to be able to step back into that environment again. And I appreciate everything that you all have done in the last 2 years. Thank you.
Excellent. I'm sure it's exciting to everyone at the school to be able to start welcoming other people to come in and the community to come in. So thank you. Any other questions? Okay, I have attempted a couple of uncomfortable silences to get people to participate, but it is after 8 o'clock. And unless I see anyone else raise their hand, I think that concludes the business we have for today. I would like to remind everyone to please vote. All ballots have been mailed to individuals, and they do need to either mail them back in, or they can place them in the drop box that is conveniently located in front of the town hall, or bring them into the clerk's office during regular off hours. The drop box is much more convenient. Oh, there is Article 7. David, is that right? Is that the...
Yes, I didn't want you to forget that we actually, Article 7 says to transact any other business that may be properly come before the meeting. I didn't think we did that, so.
Gotcha. No, thank you. Thank you. I don't think we did not. Did we even read it? Was it in the first 6? We did not.
No, it's actually a 7th article, and I don't know.
And it's on the warning itself. There it is. There we go. Gotcha. I apologize. So I will still say that you need to, if you're going to vote, you do need to get your ballot in. You may not want to trust the mail, and there will be people collecting ballots on Tuesday all day if you want to come by to hand off your ballot in person. But thank you, David. I should have had the actual warning in front of me as opposed to just relying on the slides. But Article 7, to transact any other business which may properly come before the meeting. I don't know of any other business that people are anticipating, but if anyone has a, Nikki, do you have a comment you would like to add at this time? Excellent.
I think that this is an appropriate time to give a huge thank you to Scott Richardson for all the years of service that he's done on the Heartland Board. He has done a ton of work, and he was our head negotiator for many years, which was very hard work. And so I just wanted to take a second to publicly say thank you, Scott, and we're going to miss you.
Thank you. You're welcome too.
Having been in all 8 years at Heartland Elementary School with Scott, knew his commitment then. He ate from that same cafeteria line that we're finally upgrading.
We did, Matt. That's right.
We did indeed. Thank you. Thank you for your service. Great. Any other business which may properly come before the meeting? Okay, and with that, and with the proper encouragement to actually vote, I am going to call this meeting adjourned. I don't think there needs to be a formal motion to adjourn the meeting because it's an informational meeting. Thank you everyone for coming out and for engaging. Thank you for the hard work in making the presentation clear. And if for those who are interested, we will be having a informational meeting tomorrow night on the town budget, and hope that everyone will join us for that as well. Have a good night.
Thank you, Matt.